Well, yesterday we talked about solutions to an uncertain economic future. And today I wanted to follow up with that with the significance of geographic location for sustainable living. Now, we talked about geographic location for solutions to an uncertain economic future of what you can do to survive. And I think the best thing that I can think of, the best advice I would say is where you're geographically located at. And I want to talk about water, soil, climates, the difference between urban, suburban, and country living today. So let's jump right into it. The very first thing is water. And when you think about, this is important, guys. Whenever we go to a new planet, right? If we go to explore some new area, we're going to look for water. That's the very first thing. We need oxygen. We need water. Very interesting in the human body. You go there in the threes. You can live up to 3 minutes without oxygen before you get brain damage. Most people. You can live up to 3 days without water, depending on where you're at. Like in the desert or something, you're going to dehydrate, and you can only survive about 30 days without food. So water is very significant. And in order to live a sustainable life, I see a lot of people located in areas where it's not so conducive as it is in others, right? Examples of stuff is, Arizona. You're not going to really have a great garden. And even here in California is going through a major drought. I'm in Southern California in the San Diego area, and I'm very concerned about this place. And that's why this geographic location of what I'm doing, how I'm living, very much affects me, not just in sustainable living, but even in my everyday life. What would happen if the water just completely dries up here and, you're using it just to bathe and wash clothes and things like that. So it's very important. On the other side is look what happened in 2022 in Florida. I think half the state, if not 3/4 of the state, depending on where you're at, was like 2 to 3 feet underwater. That hurricane came in and it just flooded everything. So you have smart places like Texas where before they build a community, they'll actually dig dams and things like that, water catchment systems. It does rain sometimes. I think you want to look at historically what's happened. There were times where Texas actually got flooded as well. The water was all the way up to the roofs on houses. It was like 15, 20 inches, I think, in a matter of a day or 2 days, something ridiculous. I can't remember that historical event. But wherever you're going to locate yourself, if you're going to do livestock and you're going to do vegetables and trees and things like that, and even such things as consideration as fire damage, we look in, I think it was 2021 or 2020, I think it was, in Australia. There was there's fires happening all over the place, right? A lot of people were threatened. Even Jeff Lawton, the prince of permaculture, they were very concerned, but his systems with the greenery and water catchment was able to create like a fire buffer on his large property. So I look at places like where I live here, even doing swales and things like that, which is literally, it's just pretty much in a simple form, like ditches on contour of the land to hold the water, doing key line plowing where it literally cuts the ground, a hole, like a line in the ground where the water could actually seep in and soak in and stay. And with the little bit amount of rain that we have here, it's just not, swales to me, this doesn't really do it. Some years, yes, you can get some rain and maybe you can get a good year where the water will catch, and you can do stuff. I've seen some things. I guess I have to go back on that. I've seen some permaculture farms out here in the San Diego area where the water did catch. It was on a big incline, and it did, but it all settled on the bottom. And in the swale areas, everything looked horrible, right? Everything was dried out. When you're thinking about water catchment, a good rule of thumb, I believe it is 0.65 gallons per square foot of a surface space. So whether it's a street, whether it's a roof, right, or a greenhouse, or just literally throwing up tarps, you can pretty much figure in at a 1-inch rain that you're going to get about a little bit more than half a gallon of rain per square foot. And now we want to think about where we're going to store that water. I think people do a lot of cute things with the 55-gallon rain barrels and stuff like that. Maybe in Arizona and stuff like that, that would be okay. But you get a good 1 to 2 inches rain, which we're expecting here in San Diego, or the Los Angeles area. I think it's supposed to get 3 to 5 inches in one day. Now you count those gallons and you look at how much overflow the flooding that could happen, especially if you put these things near your house or in a basement or something like that. You know, you're going to have way too much overflow. And in fact, you can cause damage. If you're creating a little dam or something to hold a pond, that thing could wash out. So many things that we could do as far as geographic location. I think before I move forward, I think one of the places that I'm actually really interested in is Florida. And going again with the Prince of Permaculture, Jeff Lawton, looking at the biome, the climate, the geographic location, lots of water, does get cold there. I think they get a couple frosts and things like that, but still being able to grow mangoes and many things. That geographic location to me seems abundant. I don't know if I'll have the time to put it in the link below, but check out Rob Greenfield. Being that I'm interested in Florida and I may take a trip this year to go see it, as far as a place for me to reside permanently, I learned a lot from him, Rob Greenfield. And what I have learned from him is that you can grow stuff pretty much year round. Now, you're not going to grow like everything all the time, right? The tropical, the humid areas, they do have times where they get super hot, and it's almost like the winter. It's so hot. It's the reverse of what winter, right? A place like Oregon, when the temperatures drop, you know, anywhere you're at where the temperatures drop below 45 degrees, the microbiology in the soil stops, right? So that's something to take in consideration. It's a place like Oregon, you know, it's depending on where you're at geographically. If you're by the coast, like where I used to live, you're not growing anything for a good probably 7-8 months out of the year, depending on what type of year you have. Now, if we look at Florida or Hawaii and places like that, people would think, oh no, stuff grows year round. It does not. It's like it's so hot that things just die off, right? In the Philippines and things like that. So a lot of stuff to take in consideration. Next I have was your soil types. So going into Florida and researching, it's basically a huge sandbar. And when you go to plant trees, it gets so saturated that the trees, the roots of new saplings, you know, will actually rot out. So the trick is what a lot of people do out there, depending again where you're at, geographically located in Florida, is they make a big giant mound. I think like anywhere from 3 to 4 to 5 feet. You plant your tree on top of that. It sets its roots out as the decomposition of compost and hopefully things you're doing will actually create soil. And trees will create their own soil. They'll send a rhizome, a root down into the ground, no matter what, right through bedrock, guys. I'm sure you guys have seen olive trees, oak trees and stuff just growing right outside of a rock. Maybe not the most healthiest, but they do create their own soil. So that's kind of the trick where you're going to do in those moist environments. In Hawaii, you have pockets. You have so much of the lava rock that you have no idea what's going on underneath that soil. Which brings me here to a thought too, is a lot of people just imagine just soil, right? There's just this dirt, even if it's perfectly flat. What I want you guys to imagine is if you ever saw a topographical map of, say, the ocean, right? Or even just the surface of the earth. What you can imagine is underneath that soil layer is that there are thick spots. There may be spots that are 15, 20, 30, 40 feet deep. And just a few feet over there, there's a ledge that will come up and there's only maybe about 3 inches of soil. So there's this whole geographic area of surface area under the soil that's not really visible to us. So it's very important when you're in places like Hawaii, Florida, right? And you're going to be planting trees or your garden or something like that. There's no really good visual of what's going on underneath there. So you can most likely tell where trees are more healthier. There's maybe more soil there. If you started planting fruit trees, you can notice a little area. It's kind of like an ocean shore, right? You'll see little pockets where the trees are just booming and other ones are just kind of not doing so good. That's a good indicator that you have a lot of soil in those areas. Another good thing about soil I learned from Zepp Holzer, which is an old man. I don't even know if Zepp Holzer's still alive. You guys might want to check him out too. But one little cookie I found is that nitrogen fixing things. So if you find such things, and the reason why I'm bringing this up right now is this is January, first week of January 2023. Got to get used to saying 23. When you see the stinging nettle, which I have abundantly at my place right now, that's a good sign of nitrogen. They love nitrogen. So the weeds in the soil will actually help you on the whatever property you're on to kind of let you know what's going on in that vicinity, right? Here in San Diego, for instance, too, I'll do one more on soil. Boy, I could just keep going on these notes here. Turn this into an hour-long podcast. But one of the things I learned here from Mr. Mark Shepard of New Forest Farms is he did a permaculture design thing here for a client, and what we found was that, or what he found was that the clay soil here was when it gets wet, it just needs to get saturated just a little bit, and the water just sinks in. Then the sun comes out and literally dries the surface, and it turns into like this cake, this hard surface, right? This how can I say? It's like a crust. So what's happening is as the sun heats that crust, it works as a layer to actually keep water in the ground for a certain amount of time, very high in clay. So all these details, I think, in geographic location for sustainable living. I mean, I don't even have on here are you going to build cob housing, right? Are you going to build a stone house? One of the best things that we know is to utilize our natural resources. If you're going to do wood core building, things like that, do you have trees? Right? Do you have clay in the area? Do you have to export things to that area to actually do a so-called sustainable house, right? We're going to move to Florida, and we're going to ship a bunch of clay from, Utah, right? It's not very sustainable. But it's, as far as geographic location for this too, imagine the amount of money you'd save if you use the resources that you have. Say we go to Montana or something, you got plenty of pine trees, Doug firs and all those kind of sugar pines and stuff like that. And you could also utilize the rocks, the stones that are there, right, with some concrete. You can intermix things and make something very beautiful. So climates, I think we pretty much talked about that. I mean, from hot to cold. Right, we talked about the soil, the microbiology. It's also a lot has to do with the sun, right? Sun exposure. Very strange. I never even knew when I lived in Oregon that the sun would actually set around 9:30 p.m. in the summer, right? You're ready to go to bed and there's still daylight out. It felt very strange. And other days it get really, really short. But what does that mean? That means that the photosynthesis, I guess I'm stepping on my words here. In a place like Oregon, yes, you only have 2 to 3 months maybe of growing, but your plants will grow so much faster. Now, we go to places where there's not so much sun. Like here in San Diego, it's actually getting dark at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, right? The sun don't even come up to like 7. So that gives you a shorter period. And geographically where your garden is located, if you have a big mountain behind you, if you have many trees that are shading things, right? Very important, your geographic location of your garden and your home. Right, even the facing the way your home is facing. Let's just look at if you were going to live in Oregon, what you would want is the front of your house to be facing south. That way, when the sun comes up, it'll melt the snow off your driveway, right? But it'll also give you thermal heat, right? We can get the radiation from the sun and heat up the areas, maybe your bedrooms and things like that, have them designed and built towards the front end and things that you're not using so much on the north end where it's very cold. Even in my house right now that I'm at, in the front area, the south-facing porch, it's just nice and hot. You're in a t-shirt and shorts in January. I know, California, San Diego specifically, is just wonderful. But you go into my lounge, my backyard, under my little garage living space, right? Little kickback area. It's freezing. You got to put sweatpants and a sweatshirt on. So living in a place like Arizona, you'd want the reverse. You'd want the sun to rise towards the back of your home, especially if you were doing something like a wofati, right? Which is basically like a hobbit house where you build a house and you cover it with dirt, right? Maybe have that facing the south so that the sun has to heat up that soil, but the north side, the sun never hits, and that's where the cool air is. And if you were going to do, as far as like climates, whether it's a house or a greenhouse, right? One of the things that you'll learn is that if you were going to pipe in cold air, right? If you wanted to circulate air in your home, literally, if you suck the air in from the north side in the shade or opened up windows and things like that as the wind's blowing, it'll actually cool the house down. Whereas if you open up the south where the heat is, you have thermal inertia in the soil and say stucco or rocks or things like that. You're going to have the hot air flowing in, so you do the reverse. So it's very important. Climate, I think, for sustainable living. God, there's so much I can go on here with. let's move forward because I'm taking up too much time. These podcasts are only supposed to last 15 minutes, and we're already on 15 minutes. If you guys like them to last longer, please comment below. There's an email. Let me know what you guys want to hear. If you guys want them to go on long, because I can just keep blabbering my mouth off here. Urban living. So the first thought that comes to me with urban living is there's so much. All of the urban living, the suburban living, and the country living, they all have their different things. But the first thing that comes to my mind with urban living in the city is that there's so much opportunities as far as like selling your food, right? And anything sustainable that you're doing, there's golf cart batteries that you can get free from golf courses. Just go over there and ask them and say, they're not the best. They're starting to get to the end of their life, but they're still usable, right? There's just so much repurposing and things we can use, utilizing people's leaves and lawn clippings to build your soil at your home. Get all the stuff that people are throwing away and think is junk, bring it to your house and utilize it to build abundance, right? There's just so much abundance. There's trees and wood chips, free wood chips I get. I mean, they're the labor of somebody's going over to somebody's house, cutting this stuff down. Instead of hauling all the weight to the landfill, they literally just swing a couple blocks away at my spin farm location that I have and dump truckloads of free mulch. And then I spread it over and I'm building soil. So there's just tons of opportunity in cities. And I think a lot of the reason why I wanted to bring that point home is that a lot of people think that, sustainability, we need to be out in the country. We need to be away from the city, when you can also learn from Toby Hemingway, the late Toby Hemingway. He passed away. The Permaculture City, I believe, is a book which I still haven't really finished reading. But one of the things that caught my eye is he moved to the country. And he figured out, God, we're spending so much money driving to the city to buy things that we can't grow ourselves and to visit. And they got lonely, right? They're like, man, it's just me and my wife. And, wifey's probably driving him crazy. Say vice versa. Maybe the husband's driving him crazy. Let's go into town. I've talked to you enough. I've heard all your points of views. Let's go hear somebody else's crappy point of view back in town. But they ended up going to town and saying, you know what? I miss having neighbors. I miss socializing and things like that. And one of the things I will say, too, as you get older for sustainable living and the significance of it is if you have health conditions, right? If you need to get to a hospital, this could literally save your life. So think about this, guys. You are having a heart attack, a stroke or something, something's happening, or you have to go and get blood tests all the time and you live an hour out of the city, out in the boonies. Does that really work? Right? And it could literally save your life if you were, like I said, having a heart attack and you dial 911. It's going to take them probably about an hour to get to you, whereas if you lived in the city or in the suburbs, it's a little closer. So things to take in consideration. Also, in my findings of research on sustainable living was that a lot of elderly people just said that when they got the huge property, they just couldn't do it themselves. A lot of them produced so much, they didn't really have to, work their whole entire land. They said the thing that kept them going, though, was all the volunteers, the woofers, people volunteer to go live on the farm and work. They said otherwise they wouldn't be able to do it. They're just getting too old and it's too much to manage. So things to take in consideration. I'm going to go live sustainable forever out in the riddle of the forest of the jungle. Maybe you might want to think about that. So next is suburban living. And this, to me, the fringe living is absolutely the best. I was mentioning that yesterday, I believe. Yeah. And the suburban, the suburban living, the fringe living there, you kind of get the best of both worlds, right? And I'm talking like I was talking about going to Florida. Things are expensive in the city, like Orlando area is kind of where I'm going to go check out. The ideal thing to me would be about 30 minutes, maybe at the most about 45 minutes, top most an hour. But ideally like 30 minutes right outside of the edge of the city, right? Where I can get to an airport or grocery stores and things like that. And you got to take consideration too, young people need a job, stuff like that. Everybody needs to make money. We all need to acknowledge that. So if it's an hour's drive every single day, that's a lot of commute, right? Unless you have a home-based business. But this still gives you the area to sell, maybe possibly food, to do more trading and things like that. You're not so far out in the country, right? And let's talk about the country, because I got to wrap this up here soon. In the country living, we're going to have, way more space. I think we have way more freedom. You want to do biochar, which is interesting. I'll give you guys a little cookie on that. 1 tablespoon, according to Jeff Lawton, the Prince of Permaculture, 1 tablespoon of biochar has the same surface as 10 acres. That's how much of the granules and everything. This is for microorganisms and stuff to eat. So But living out there in the country, you have so much space and there's so much you could do. You can make your own biochar without having the fire department called on you and stuff like that, right? You have basically more freedom. And I think sometimes if you had tractors and stuff like that, we're talking acreage. Now you're going from a gardener to a farmer and dealing with other people, say, that do like cattle meats and stuff like that. You can grow a crap ton of different things, and you can swap amongst yourselves. That's where big, large amounts of produce and fruits and vegetables and meats and stuff come from, is way out in that country. So living in that area and having that community, I think, is kind of something I'm looking into as well. I mean, I would love to see where I can't even see my neighbor, right? Things like that. So out in the country, I think you'd get lonely, is for one. If you're a very sociable type of person, if you have medical conditions, that could be a problem. But the abundance, the freedom, I think it's unmatched throughout the city and the suburban fringe living, and might be something to take in consideration. My thoughts, though, final thoughts on something like that would be to build something up out in the country. If I went that far out, say like 5, 20, 30 acres, something, parcel those things out. Maybe start building some homes. As the city, you got to take consideration too. The city is going to start growing and growing and growing, especially if you're by a major city like San Diego, or in Florida, Orlando, or in Oregon, Portland, right? It's sooner or later in the decades, it's going to get closer and closer. And I believe that you can maximize your investment by, say, having that land out there where you can subdivide it and build multiple houses, or just sell off the land and maybe move to the suburbs where you're just right on the fringe, right? Just on the fringe again. So you have the doctors and the whatever's you're needing, maybe the social aspects. I don't know. Maybe I would just live in the country. I actually forecast that nobody'd ever see me again, and I would just stay there and die, and nobody'd even know, and I'd be like, fine. All right, guys, it's, oh my God, 22 minutes. I've gone on way too long. All right, guys, if you like this sort of things, please give it a thumbs up, like it, subscribe, all that. I guess I'm getting back to asking for those type of things, because that's what kind of keeps the show running here. I'd love to do live things where I can do Q&A and many, many things. The more you guys give me attention with this stuff, if you like this sort of thing, please feel free to do all the things you're supposed to do. I can't like, subscribe, notification bell, review, whatever. So guys, that's the show, and I really hope that helps out. You guys tune in for the next show. It's going to be, it should be on tips to saving money. I think a lot of people are interested in, surviving this recession that's possibly coming here. And also, don't forget the comments below. If there's something that you need help with and you want to hear about, let me know. That's what I'm here for. Over and out.